All right, y'all, welcome back to the channel. We won't waste any time. The reason why you are here is because you are concerned, like I am, of the rumors you've heard of RFK dropping out, which is not something he has said at all. It's something that Nicole Shanahan has floated that they are considering. Now, we will pause and say this isn't like a false allegation, right? Like, Nicole Shanahan was brought on the ticket. And again, this is me as an avid RFK supporter. She was brought on the ticket because she had essentially unlimited monies, right? At a time when he needed unlimited monies. He didn't have a super PAC, or he doesn't have the DNC or the RNC that can literally funnel like dark money into the campaign. Like, he needs real people's monies. So yeah, I will say it is a pause for concern, but I think the reason why it's being discussed amongst their campaign is because they want to know what their actual path to victory is, especially Nicole Shanahan, as someone who keeps cutting checks. Like, what is she cutting checks for? Like, millions of dollars is it doesn't matter if you have $1 billion. Millions of dollars is millions of dollars, okay? So this video will in particular discuss RFK's one path to victory. There's only one path for him to win. It's the same path that I saw from the onset. The eye of the needle has gotten a lot smaller as he has been sued left, right, and center across the country. But I don't think that it has affected this path. It just made the path a little bit smaller. So from the onset, if you go back and watch my channel from, I don't know, a handful of months ago, I talked about the 7 states that RFK could actually win. Now, I guess there is a moral victory if he gets over 5% in the general election, like nationwide, because you can secure federal funding for the following election for your party. I don't know how that works with an independent party. Granted, he has started a We the People party. Maybe the We the People party will get federal funding for the next election cycle if he were to break 5%, which I think is beyond likely if he remains in the race and continues actually campaigning. But we're not really in it for a moral victory. I don't believe in a protest vote per se. Like, that's not why I vote. I suppose it does have some merit to show, you know, the powers that be, that there are other voices besides just the red and the blue team. Historically, you know, in 2016, I voted for Evan McMullin, and I lived in California at the time. And some of you might say, oh, that's a protest vote because he had no chance of winning. Well, the Evan McMullin campaign, they believed very strongly that it was possible for them to win the presidency if they won the state of Utah, which they spent all of their time campaigning in. If they won the state of Utah and secured those electoral votes and nobody got to 270, then a contingent election could take place, and he believed it was possible for him to win that contingent election. So we want to talk about that and specifically in this video, as well as the 3 states that Kennedy can actually win. And I don't want to waste your time because there's lots of good content regarding RFK, his actual platform, and his policies. But if you are part of the RFK campaign and you are seeing this, I behoove you to show this video to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and show him there actually is a legitimate path for him to become the president, not just some pipe dream. I don't believe in fairy tales. I don't believe in magic and mystery. Like, I believe in things that are actually tangible and real, that have an actual probable outcome of happening. So contingent election is laid out in the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. Now, there's very specific language on what happens here, and I think it would directly affect Nicole Shanahan's desire to remain in the race if they felt that were the only chance of them winning is through a contingent election laid out in the 12th Amendment. So in the 12th Amendment, the top 3 electoral vote getters, whatever the right way to, the winners of electoral votes, whatever the right way to say that, are if no candidate reaches 270, right? So somebody obviously would receive a plurality of vote, but if they don't receive the majority of the electoral votes, then the top 3 electoral vote winners go to a contingent election, and that is decided by the state houses. That is, there are 50 state houses. Somebody must win 26 of the state houses, and it's not just a landslide that it would go for Donald Trump, even though I think right now the current state houses are like 27 to 23. right? I don't necessarily think that means in a contingent election that Trump would win, and RFK has explained that in depth in a few other videos. But just for the purpose of this video, that's what we're looking at, right? So there is historical precedent for this. In the 1824 election, there was a contingent election that was, the 12th Amendment was put in around like 1804 after something similar happened with Thomas Jefferson, I believe. So in the 1824 election, there were 4 people that got electoral votes. It was like widely split. Andrew Jackson, if I got my history right, and I researched this long ago, but if I got my history right, Andrew Jackson actually won the plurality of votes. And I suppose you could say the popular vote, but even though he didn't, of course, if there's 4 people winning states, nobody's getting 50% of the popular vote, of course. And in the contingent election, it was actually Martin Van Buren who became the president. So even though Andrew Jackson won the plurality of votes, there are obviously way fewer than 270 needed because there weren't as many states back then. Yada, yada, yada. But so the person who came in second actually became the president. Andrew Jackson became the president later. But that is what it is. So why does this matter? If you know about the 12th Amendment, why does this matter right now? Well, what it also lays out is who becomes the vice president. You thought, I think we all kind of think that. It's like, oh, the vice president and the president are kind of a package deal. But they're not. They're actually not. So what it says is that the top 3 presidential candidates who receive electoral votes will go to a contingent election by the state houses. The top 2 vice presidential candidates will be decided on by the Senate. Okay? And why does this matter? Because even from the onset, there was no path that I ever saw that RFK would get the second most number of electoral votes. The only path for him was to win roughly around 6 or 7 states, really 6. There's kind of some wild cards in there. And it means that at no point in the path to victory that I saw for RFK would Nicole Shanahan even sniff becoming the vice president, right? I believe that she's a very intelligent woman who has a lot of really good ideas, can speak in a very eloquent and simple manner that RFK is not able to do because of the way he sounds. It doesn't bother me. I've listened to him for a year and a half. I think he's amazing, but she's able to speak about his ideas in a soft, eloquent, and confident way, and it's a really important voice. But she's basically like a campaign manager. There's never a path that I ever saw that she would actually become the vice president, because if in the best world they get the 3rd most electoral college votes, and assuming that neither one of the major party candidates die just shortly before the election, and they're on all 50 ballots, but they're not alive anymore, and so that, a whole hullabaloo of things. So I think that would weigh heavily into her willingness to continue pumping money into something when she can't actually be part of the ticket. I suppose she could receive a cabinet position. I don't know. But what that means is, in a world where RFK wins, J.D. Vance or Tim Walz becomes the vice president. This is just facts. This is not conjecture. It's not really opinion. It's just a fact. Like, this is what's going to actually happen. So the reason why you're here, the 3 states that RFK can actually win to force a contingent election for him to become president, and I think it for all of us who support him, at least a million people who signed petitions, but also probably tens of millions of people around the country who plan to vote for him, maybe somewhere in the camp of like 20 million votes. There's a relative possibility he could get 15 to 20 million votes from Americans this year. The states of Alaska, state of Maine, and the state of Utah. So going back to a previous video, the obvious ones, Alaska and Maine, are the only 2 states that have ranked choice voting. The importance of ranked choice voting is there's no such thing as a wasted vote. You can vote with your heart, even if you feel that your candidate could not win, but it wouldn't necessarily cause the candidate that you least want to win to become to win the state's electoral votes. So Maine has had ranked choice voting for decades now. They love it. They understand it. It's not weird. It works, right? So there's a real possibility for him to campaign heavily in these 3 states where no one has really ever campaigned heavily before, because it's not that many electoral votes and they're not hotly contested places. So it's not really a good reason for a campaign to dump tons of money, travel to the outskirts of the country, literally in Maine and Alaska, like the nethermost parts of the country, to campaign for just a handful of votes. So Maine's always been in play. Ross Perot did very well there I think he got over 30% of the vote in 1992. Alaska is a bit of a wild card because they just introduced ranked choice voting. It was in the gubernatorial elections in 2022. I believe it affected the outcome of Sarah Palin's congressional race, where the person that had the second most votes actually became the winner of the election. So there's a real precedent there. The RFK could actually win if people vote with their heart, knowing that, hey, it doesn't matter, I can vote for RFK. You know, we've never done this in our state before. I can vote for RFK because I really think he's the best candidate, but I'll vote for my second choice, down the ballot because, I actually think this is what will really happen. The caveat with Alaska is that RFK's platform and policy aligns very closely with Native Americans. I would say almost to a fault, any Native American who's actually paying attention would likely vote for RFK. His belief on, preserving the environmental majesties of our country aligns very well with Native Americans, many of which who hold this land to be sacred, who thinks this is a very special place to live, and we shouldn't destroy it with fracking and strip mining, et cetera, that it's important that we preserve these areas. So Alaska has the highest percentage of indigenous populations. 20% of the electorate are indigenous. And historically, these people, as if you're not born under a rock, that Native Americans have been historically disenfranchised, that their needs have never been addressed, that they have been lied to and persecuted for hundreds and hundreds of years, given the worst parts of land as part of treaties, given the least arable land, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now, as RFK has discussed, that the lands that they hold now are actually the most fertile with natural resources in terms of rare earth metals that are worth billions of dollars. So, all of a sudden, the land that wasn't that special that they were given is the most special land, for the most part throughout the country. And so I think in Alaska, 20% electorate that doesn't typically vote, they could be, if RFK spent a significant time in the state, they would be incentivized to go out and vote for someone that actually mattered, someone that's actually going to represent them. Okay, so these two states, Maine and Alaska, very much in play because of their voting structure, the last of which is the state of Utah. As I mentioned before, Evan McMullin did very well. He nearly beat Hillary Clinton in the state of Utah in 2016. Now, that might not sound very special, but for a third-party candidate to almost come in second has not happened in 30-something years since Ross Perot came in second in a few states. Now, he didn't win any states, but he was campaigning nationally rather than focusing on areas where he could actually win. So as someone who is a Latter-day Saint, it doesn't matter what you think about my faith or whatever, but Latter-day Saints lean heavily conservative. However, they are very independently minded and tend to vote with a moral compass rather than, just red or blue team. And it's very evident that he got over 20% of the vote in 2016 during Donald Trump's first run, and it was a much closer red state than it likely should have been in 2020, because people in Utah don't just vote. They actually care about the character of a person. And I know that RFK has, some interesting past history, but in terms of moral character and his ability to tell the truth to the American people without deliberately trying to be deceptive, I think that his character would be supported very well by the people of Utah. In a Deseret News poll recently, as recent as last month, I believe, or maybe just at the tail end of June, he was polling 20% in Utah. As far as I know, he hasn't done any major campaigning in Utah. So these three states, I believe, if I got the numbers right, add up to about 13 electoral votes. I know Maine has the votes on district, and it's possible you could actually just win one delegate in Maine, which even that would give you an opportunity for a contingent election under, again, threading the needle extremely small that no one reaches 270. But with 13 electoral votes, there are actually a few paths, if you play around with the electoral map, and some of the swing states, you know, not all the swing states go one way, that some of them swing left, some of them swing blue. There is an illegitimate path, actually a few of them, where RFK could prevent Trump or Harris from receiving 270. And I think that's the reason why I really hope that he stays in. But at the same time, him, you know, trying to compete on a national level and going state to state and holding rallies, that's not the path to victory. And I think it's just important to be a realist, especially if you are a supporter of RFK. Please somehow get this video to him and tell him to go to Alaska, go to Maine, and go to Utah, places that he can actually legitimately win, where his policies are would actually be supported by the people there, where people aren't as blind to the red and blue teams as they have historically been in a majority of the states, where people don't have to vote out of fear, or they won't vote out of fear, where they have shown an historical precedent to not vote out of fear, that they vote out of the moral compass they believe is the right person to represent their state. So, you know, I lay that case out for you. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm posting this right now. It is Thursday. I'm headed to work. But, you know, there's rumors that floating that he's going to drop out by Friday. If there's a way that this video could get to him, and, you know, RFK, throw this on 2x speed so you don't have to listen to me for 15, 16 minutes, and just hear me out and talk it over with your campaign and get your butt up to Alaska, Maine, and Utah. And let's show the world that there are people who think like you, that you're not the only one out there. You're not on an island just because you're getting sued in every state, that there are actually people who legitimately support you enough that they support you over the other two candidates in their state. And I rest my case. I think there's a real path here. And God bless you guys. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. But more importantly, just share this with people so somehow it can get to RFK. All right, I'll see y'all.